looks like it. Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to Cuyahoga County's Community Development Subcommittee, on which is a Reinvestment Advisory Subcommittee to the Community Development Committee. It's Wednesday, December 13th, and we're in Committee Room B at our administrative headquarters. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll for Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent. Ms. Anderson. Mr. Gary Benjamin. Mr. Gary Benjamin is absent.
He indicated that he is on his way. I just received a text from him.
Thank you. Ms. Blackwell. Present. Ms. Blue Donald. Ms. Blue Donald is absent. Ms. Martin O'Toole. Ms. Martin O'Toole is absent. Mr. Nowak. Mr. Nowak is absent. Mr. Searin. Mr. Searin is absent. Ms. Wheelo. Ms. Wheelo is absent. Mr. Zone. Mr. Zone is absent. You do not have a quorum.
All right, then we will move to public comment next. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment?
No, Madam Chair, no one has signed in.
Okay, we will not do the minutes because we do not have a quorum. So were there any matters referred to this committee from the primary committee?
No, Madam Chair, no matters referred.
Well, then at this time, we will begin the presentation by Mr. Frank Ford on his banking and lending research.
Thank you. One quick thing, Director Martin O'Toole did speak to me and said that she was triple booked and wanted me to extend her regrets. You know, she would want to be here.
I'm sure she'll call.
Yeah. So I made a presentation of some earlier preliminary research to the October 25th meeting of this subcommittee. So this is a further extension of that supplements the original presentation. The full research report won't be done till the spring, possibly late winter. I am sort of moving faster than usual, but so this is a progress report. And these are helpful to get input from people to help shape this product. Two things just to point out before we get into too much that I think are worth noting. One is that because interest rates rose in 2022, that caused a drop in applications for home purchase loans and actually refinance as well. Interestingly, it didn't cause a drop in home improvement, but because of the drop in applications for home purchase, I think that does explain why you'll see some of the numbers for home purchase loans by lenders are lower than they were in the year before. And I think it's important to point that out. The second thing is that median home sale prices have risen during and since COVID in most of the county, although most of the east side of Cleveland and several east inner suburbs have not completely recovered. So where this is relevant is we've been talking about small dollar home purchase loans, and the number that we've used was 50,000, and that's generally been talked about amongst housing practitioners. But I think while the 50,000, excuse me, is still applicable for the east side of Cleveland, I think I need to go to a higher number, like 100,000 for the east inner suburbs. And I'm open to, because I think we're probably, what you'll see in a few minutes is when we get to the east inner suburbs, a lot of the banks, their numbers for the below 50 are low, and I think it's partly because prices have gone up. So please, Mayor Blackwell, if you have any thoughts.
Madam Chair, I'd like to respond to that. The one thing that I do is I have a relationship with most of the realtors in Maple Heights. So they send me their listings. Mm-hmm. I also have a very close relationship with the Akron-Cleveland Association of Realtors, and I get their data quarterly. I have an on-site housing administrator, and I get the numbers from our building department monthly. And so that is incorrect for entering suburbs. I think I am safe in saying that's probably the case for Lawrenceville Heights. We've seen a significant amount of value appreciation in Lawrenceville Heights with their new construction, as well as Garfield Heights. I think I speak for them, Bedford and Bedford Heights. So that does not reflect what is happening in the entering suburbs. You're correct.
So Yes, I'll say that again. What I was going to propose is that, and make more work for myself, but that I continue to do the 50,000 as a threshold because of the east side of Cleveland, but that I go up to 100,000 and try to capture other areas that have been improving. And it's, I mean, eventually, I guess we could say small dollar loans are $200,000, but I'm safe in thinking that you do both 50 and we do 100 and see what that looks like. In fact, I can present that to the group when I get that done, and then you can say whether you think it looks right, and we could still further amend it.
If I could further comment, I think if you don't do that, this is not right.
Okay.
And I've been saying that continuously. In the HMDA data, I mean, all of the data says that this isn't right. Given that I sit on this committee along with Mayor Sarin from Cleveland Heights, another entering, so I think we want to get it right. So this is just not the truth, and it's not factual. If we're going to talk about east inner suburbs, that's a different number than east side of Cleveland, so that we have a clear picture of what our work is, what our challenge, where things are getting a little bit better. Otherwise, it's just not, it's not really truly reflective of the entire Cuyahoga County on the east side.
Let me clarify something. The reason for having the 50 in the first place was, sorry, because of a concern that banks are not willing to make small dollar loans. And the 50 seemed to make sense. If it's still, wow, if it's still a problem, sorry, hold on a minute. Well, that might help. She didn't hand me drugs. This is I'm not sure, Ricola. So, yeah. So if there's still some entering suburbs where some banks might be reluctant to make a loan even below 100, we'd want to capture that. We're still looking at the overall picture with mortgage loans. It's just a question of, are there still some people that are challenged because they're trying to borrow 80? And the example to give, which isn't entering suburbs, but it was east side, where Councilman Polensik went to KeyBank last year, tried to get an $80,000 loan to buy the house next to his, and the loan officer said, we don't make loans under 100. If they don't make loans under 100, that could impact the east inner suburbs in some cases.
I'm going to speak to that. I think that's a story we've told many times. What we haven't done is told the other story. We've heard the story about elected official Polensik, but you haven't told the story. We're not telling a story where that's not the case. And so to really be a committee that looks at everything and all the facts, we have to tell the other story. So the fact that last year over 300 homes were sold at arm's length transactions says that's not the story. That's one story. But let's make sure we tell the whole story. So that was the issue in Collinwood.
Madam Mayor,
But what's the story in Maple Heights?
300 sell at what price points?
Over $100,000, about $105,000. So I think $100,000, to conclude my comments, is appropriate for the east entering suburbs.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we are capturing the loans made in the east inner suburbs overall. I want to make sure that I'm not missing something that you know, I'll be happy to adjust anything that the committee needs. Well, in the interest of time, should I go on and thank you? Here's this is what's new in this update. And I did this last year, but I hadn't done it by October 25th at the last presentation. This will include loans to black borrowers, both the top 15 lenders as well as the 7 banks that have community benefits agreements. Loans to low and moderate income borrowers, again, top 15, as well as the 7 CBA lenders. Home purchase loans below 50 and below, I had not done that yet. And an updated comparison of home purchase loans to arm's length sales. Also, I'm including something to just demonstrate loss of value and equity and wealth. In the east side in particular, I think to some extent I could try to do that for the east inner suburbs, but I think because the east inner suburbs have escalated in price, it's not quite the same as the east side of Cleveland, where there is still homes that are significantly underwater. As Mayor Blackwell has pointed out, you're doing better, and that's good. You want to be doing better. And then the last thing is I have some revised home ownership trends. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Yeah, Cynthia and I, staff member Cynthia Mason and I were at a workshop of the Federal Reserve Bank yesterday. And afterwards, Cynthia and I talked about the fact that, well, gee, should we look at what are the CRA ratings of these 7 banks that have community benefits agreements? And they tend to be the ones that the county would probably consider in entering into an agreement. So I've got that in here as well. I'm going to jump to the lending to black borrowers. This is the top 15 lenders. Cross Country is the leader. They have been for several years. Most of the top banks making loans to black borrowers are not banks. Most of them are independent mortgage companies. Huntington is an exception. They are pretty high. They're second. Otherwise, you can see, well, there's a few other, Fifth Third is in there, Key Bank, Bank of America, and Chase Bank at lower numbers, but they are in the top 15. The other thing, oh, this is new also, I forgot to mention this. On the far right, I've added something to this table that wasn't there before, and that is what is the market share of these 15 banks of all loans to African-American borrowers?
15 lenders?
Top, well,
They're lenders since not all of them are banks.
oh, did I say 15 banks?
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you for correcting me, because it is intended to be the top 15 lenders. And this was something suggested, actually, I think it might have been suggested last time I made a presentation somewhere of these preliminary findings, and somebody said, you know, why don't we look at what's the market share of these banks? So the difference is the total of the 15 is 1,928 loans, excuse me, 1,278 loans made. There were 2,231 loans made when you take all lenders who made loans in Cuyahoga County. So the top 15, they are 57%. So they're the lion's share, the majority, you know, not quite, certainly the majority. But you can see that the top market share is Cross Country, and Huntington's at 6%. For the other community benefits lenders that are in bold red, it's a lower percentage. Next one is that I looked at, now this is just the 7 lenders who have had community benefits agreements or community benefits plans. I just generically calling them CBA lenders. And if they had an agreement, was usually with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, or if they had a plan, it's something they just came up with on their own. But it's where they've pledged to do better over the last 7 years. For loans to black borrowers, Huntington went from 97 to 133. The others are all grouped lower. And I'm just looking, sorry. Key Bank, it's worth noting that Key Bank went from, looks like 8 loans or 9 loans to 46. So even though their numbers are lower, that over 7 years, that's a significant increase. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. Unless there's any questions, feel free to just shout them out. Lending to low moderate income borrowers. And this is borrowers that are 80% or they're below 80% of the Cuyahoga median family income of $76,000. So that means below $61,000. And the first is, again, the top 15. Cross Country is, again, at the top, more than double, just about more than double any of the others. Huntington is, again, second. There are also quite a few independent mortgage lenders in this group. Fifth Third and PNC are of the 7 community of lenders who have community benefits agreements. They're the only 2 in here in the top 15. Key Bank, Chase, and I'm not sure, US Bank are not in the top 15, but they're not too far beyond that. The market share is pretty similar. Cross Country's got a 12% market share, Huntington 6%, and the others are, between 2 and 5. The next one is, again, shifting to what does it look like when we look at the 7 lenders who have these CBA agreements or made CBA pledges over a 7-year period. Now, this is interesting because notice in the last year, almost everybody dropped. Huntington went from 353 to 133. Fifth Third went from 150 down to 50. And Key went from 105 down to somewhere in the 30s or around 40. I didn't actually have room to put individual numbers. It was getting too compressed there. But one of the explanations, I think, could be that those high interest rates caused a drop in applications. In fact, I know that I did look this up. I don't have a graph to show it. But Huntington, for example, got significantly less applications from low, moderate income borrowers in 2022 compared to 2021. And I assume that's because of the interest rates. That may change when we look at
The jump in interest rates means clearly, it's transparent that the monthly mortgage payment is going to jump significantly when our interest rates go from 4.25%,
Right.
they were during COVID, to 7.9, 8.25. That's the range I'm seeing, depending on the credit scores of borrowers. So,
Yeah.
I can just imagine that it would begin to tunnel down.
Yeah. And I wanted to point this out because otherwise someone could just look at this and say, oh my God, Huntington dropped by, more than half and Fifth Third dropped. I think there's an explanation here that is not related to performance. Although a deeper look would be trying to compare, well, if their applications dropped, did their loans drop in proportion to that? I haven't done that yet. I was thinking I would try to do that. So next is, this is the top 15 lenders making small dollar loans, still using that 50,000 number that we've used before. But again, I'm going to update that. And hopefully by the next time you see a presentation, I'll be able to show this for both the 50 and then separately I'll show it for the 100,000. And sorry. Yes, please, go ahead.
Point of clarification on the review of the top 15 lenders making small dollar loans. The third bullet, east side of Cleveland, do 75% of the Black people who live in Cleveland live on the east side? Or is 75% of the population?
Is African American. It had been 80.
Okay.
It's actually come down a little. What page were you on, by the way?
10?
Okay. Yes.
Two different things?
And I don't know what page we're on right now. Maybe I had it. Well, I think it was this one.
You were, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yes, and just to point out, up until a couple years ago, that figure was 80%. The eastern suburbs, I believe, is still around 52, but I will double check that. But I know that the east side actually came down, Black population's percentage. Before I look at the individual lenders, this is just.
Madam Chair.
Oh, please.
Yes.
Mr. Ford, what gives you that data? What do you think contributes to the Black population on the east side going down? And where are they going? Any idea?
I don't. The data comes from comparing census data, which, generally the main census data would be 2000, 2010, and 2020. And then in between, we've got this American Community Survey data, which is considered an interim. And I noticed that the percent for African Americans on the east side was dropping last time I looked. But I don't know, and I think it's a good question. And we're missing some people who might even have an answer to that today. But
I would wonder, are they moving out of state are more moving to the west side.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to, not giving you more work.
No,
I'm certainly not suggesting that.
if they were moving to the east inner suburbs, see, I thought it was interesting that why would black population be declining as it is in the east side of Cleveland and not also declining in the east inner suburbs? Could it be because they moved from the east side to the east inner suburbs? I mean, that's a purely hypothetical. I have no idea yet. But I think it is worth looking at that. This was something that I did recently, actually not for this study, but for something else that I did and presented recently that I thought would be interesting for people to see. Why, it sort of explains why the 50,000 threshold, even though I think we're clear we're going to also go to 100,000, why is the 50 still relevant, at least for the east side, when you see that the red, although everything is coming up, which is a good sign that the recovery is taking place, but east side is still 28,750 below the peak that it was at in 2005. So that represents a lot of lost equity and lost wealth in the black community on the east side. So again, I'm going to just move on. This is, and one more explanation of why is 50,000 still useful. This is comparing the 1 to 3 family arm's length sales in the 5 regions of the county. These 5 regions, which is the regions that Case Western's been using for years for its data. And then the green bars are the 1 to 4 family loans. And I usually point this out that although it seems like 1 to 3 and 1 to 4 family doesn't match up, it actually does, because 99% of all home sales are 1 to 2 family. So it's statistically insignificant, the difference between 1 to 3 and 1 to 4, or between 3 and 4 anyway. So as you can see, that the outer suburbs have the highest percentage of loans, the highest percentage of actual loans to sales. There is no region where it's a 1-to-1 because there are people paying cash or they're financing some other way. The west inner suburbs is 75%, west side of Cleveland is 62%, the east inner suburbs is come down to 59%, and then you see a huge drop to 25%. So it's not that there aren't sales of homes taking place on the east side of Cleveland. 3,700 is a respectable number, and actually almost the same as the west side of Cleveland. But the suspicion, and again, this is not proven, but the theory that a lot of housing advocates have is 2 things are going on here. One is banks' unwillingness, or I'll say it another way, that home buyers are challenged to get home mortgage loans. And you mix that with the fact that we've got an influx of investors coming in from not only around the country, but around the world, paying cash. So if the median sale price is 50,000, there's a lot of homes that the investors are paying cash for them. So to me, it suggests an unmet need, significant unmet need, and it's also an affordable housing opportunity if there are homes for sale. I'm going to go on to, and this is looking at the top 15 lenders at that 50,000 or less category. Oddly enough, cross-country wasn't at the top, but you still have a lot of independent, non-bank mortgage companies on this list. Huntington is second, as they were before. But the numbers, this is the whole county. The numbers are fairly small. I'm just going to keep going because, as I've suggested, this really is only relevant, or I shouldn't put it as only. It's more relevant when you start to look at the east side of Cleveland, where there are homes selling for a median price of approximately 50,000. When you get to the city of Cleveland, that's the next one. Sort of the same grouping of lenders. The numbers are still fairly small. You go to the east side of Cleveland, the third one, the numbers are even smaller. And this is the one that, it just seems to me that this is where there's a problem. And again, it could be either people unable to get bank loans, or it could be that investors are picking up these properties and outcompeting buyers. I know that many of us probably know Henry Studemeyer, whose family's been a realtor on the east side of Cleveland, east side of county for decades. And he has told me stories of he has a buyer lined up to buy an affordable home. And before they can get that loan processed, an investor comes in and pays cash. So anyway, I think that's, now when we go to the next one, the east inner suburbs, see, this is where, yes, the numbers are low, but I suspect they're not low because I think the answer is that there are just fewer homes in the east inner suburbs selling for $50,000 or less. I'm going to move on to this. This is just the 7 lenders who have CBA lenders who've made a commitment to do better. This is interesting that Huntington, in so many other categories, has not only, is 2 things about Huntington that have been apparent from the research I've done over the last couple of years. One is that they've not only led in many categories, but they've also increased over the 7-year period. So you see many of these graphs where Huntington on the left side, the green line, starts low and then they've gone high. This is an odd thing which I'm not sure I know what explains is why Huntington, over the 7 years, of course it's bounced up and down a little, and that last drop could be again the applications went down. But it might be worth having a conversation with Huntington about just what they're experiencing, because they certainly had been a leader in this area previously. This is countywide. Here's the city of Cleveland. The patterns look very similar. Here's the east side of Cleveland. A little bit different there. Huntington is still the top lender. They had 24 of these loans in 2021. They did drop, but again, that could be applications dropped. And then we have everybody else grouped much lower. We have some lenders making 0.
Madam
or 1 or
Chair,
2.
if
Yeah.
I could, I know I'm just all over the place today, but this is really, really important to me. It's kind of my passion. And having worked in banking, I think something we should consider too is the employment issue. There may be less loan officers. There's been a huge turnover in the banking industry. So I'm seeing that the decrease for Huntington, I think if we dug a little further, you may find that there's an employment. There's a retention issue.
At the bank?
There's been a lot of turnover in banks. I've got 3 or 4 people that applied recently that used to work at banks. So it could be the lack of loan officers, which could be affecting this too if we really got into it, because I know there's a big turnover in banking, especially loan officers of color.
Well, and that would affect.
And if it's tied to the incentives,
Yeah.
that's tied to their compensation package, that's also an issue. So I don't think we can dismiss the maybe the lack of a personnel, loan officers, especially those of colors, when it's tied to compensation.
I think that's a good point.
So one of the things that I've been seeing and hearing is that automation helps reduce the number of actual people that they need in the lending and in the, actually at their retail outlets, at the branch banks. So you will see an actual ATM in some lobbies. I don't see them at every lobby, but some banks have included ATMs as well as reducing the number of people. So that is something across the board. It's not one bank or the other. I've seen it at almost every one of them. So that's something I don't think there's a way to have that data without asking the lenders what their reduction in staff has been and how they're accommodating the need. In addition, We know, and I know that this personally, I bet everyone at this table does more online than they ever did before. When I opened my first checking account as an adult out of grad school, away from the credit union that my father had me have my checking account at in Dayton, that you went to the bank. The only thing that was done electronically was the deposit of your paycheck.
Yeah.
Everything else you did manually. So I think there's a significant difference from back in the day and what we need today. Because I think that most folks have more than one account and they handle all of it electronically. You see, the only people I know who regularly know their branch managers and the tellers are folks who own retail businesses or restaurants and have to do cash deposits every day.
Right, and to that point, Chair, when you're processing through a kiosk or a loan center, the possibility of a loan review committee getting together, looking at a marginal loan, and a senior officer making that call is absent from the review process.
Then they don't get to the loan review
And they
committee.
don't get there.
Yeah.
So that too is a part of what's missing when it gets that automated. And that lien, you don't have that loan review committee saying, I've got 3 loans. This looks like a good loan, but this is the issue. And maybe they need to send a letter explaining
Yeah.
why this was a charge off. That used to happen. It's just a processing business rather than a person-to-person, kind of a personal banking, a committee actually looking at those loans that they could have made.
Yeah.
If they maybe get some additional information, or can you give me 3 more months of statements or something, or an employer saying that you've got this raise coming. That used to happen, and it's just not happening, and it's affecting the number of loans that are being made in addition to all that you have uncovered.
Well, the data does not tell the whole story always. Anecdotal information can be just as powerful, and certainly this committee has said that its business isn't just looking at the bank that's a partner with the county, but could be looking at other banks just to have discussions and explore things like that.
I think my colleagues and I on this committee are very concerned about where you're going with the very last page of this study.
Yeah, let me get to that, sorry.
And it is because that's why we're looking at everything.
Yeah,
Home ownership, I'm going to steal your thunder because this is my committee.
yeah, yes. Oh, it is. I'm turning off my
You might
microphone.
do all the homework, but I get to steal the thunder. Home ownership is declining, and that is not what we want in Cuyahoga County. Home ownership is the way the average American builds wealth. Black, white, red, or yellow, like our little Bible school song says. You build wealth if you're not wealthy already, or you aren't a rocket scientist. A significant piece of it is in home ownership. And we're looking at numbers that are upside down as far as I'm concerned.
Frank, is your microphone?
There's a connection between this slide and the one that preceded it. Going back to, I'll just look at it briefly here with you. Again, Cynthia and I were at this Federal Reserve workshop yesterday. It was informative and well presented by people from the FDIC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and the Federal Reserve. But Cynthia and I, we started talking about, well, how do banks get these ratings? And the criteria that the federal regulators use is fairly broad. So banks get credit from everything from donating staff hours at a Little League game, whatever. And when you look at these ratings again, these are the 7 banks who have said over the last 7 years, we're going to do better. They're all rated outstanding. There's only a couple exceptions. And so if everybody's rated outstanding, then why
is this happening?
And this is over 20 years.
So I want
this
to ask
decline.
one of our colleagues at the table today, Barbara Anderson, to make a comment. Barbara fought when we had whole neighborhoods going belly up in Greater Cleveland to bring back home ownership and saving homes. What are you seeing in this stuff, this data, this compilation of pieces of information? when you fought the banks almost 15 years ago now, these were trends, in my opinion, you started to see then. Talk to us, Barbara.
The sad thing that I see is that these trends haven't changed much. And because of that, we see our neighborhoods, our communities continuing to decline. That is why it is so important that we as a team, as a group, that we do more, that we hold the banks, the financial institutions, hold them more accountable. To me, it's a farce to see all these outstanding ratings that I'm looking at for
Barbara,
these.
would you give people a little of your background who are tuning in for the first time and may not understand what your historical involvement with lending and home ownership in Cuyahoga County is?
Certainly, back in the early 1990s, I began actually to experience some of what we see now with the banks and predatory lending. My family was one of the first families to move into the Slavic Village neighborhood, and because we were the first minorities, the first blacks that moved in there, we experienced a lot of arson, where our home was continuously set on fire. My children were abused and talked about as far as that they would be raped on the railroad tracks. And those things went on and on and on. And as much as we tried to do, the banks finally said, if you have just one more fire, we will no longer insure you. And of course, we had several fires after that. I became an activist largely because I did not know that it was racial. My family did not know it was racial. But then there was a night that another family that had recently moved in by the name of Mabel Gant, she mirrored my sister. My sister was struggling with cancer at that time. Mabel Gant was in a wheelchair like my sister was. Her home was set on fire, and Mabel Gant didn't make it out. That was one of the first times that my husband and I actually agreed on something when it comes to home ownership, because before I would be, we got to get out of here, we've got to move. And my husband would say, we're not going anywhere. Then there would be times that he would say, I can't put my family at risk like this, we've got to move. And I'd say, we're not going anywhere. But that night, we agreed that we weren't going anywhere. Our home did go into foreclosure, and that began the fight to save my home. We began to team up with another organization called Eastside Organizing Project, led by Inez Kellingsworth. After I had gone everywhere else, Richard Celeste, I'd gone to testify before Congress. Chip Bromley was the leader in making sure that I did that. I went to Sally Jesse Raphael show. Everybody here is too young to remember that. But
Thank you for that.
but the fight became desperate. We needed to make a change. As I began to watch my neighborhood, Slavic Village, begin to decline because the color went from black to green. And once it got to money, we could see people actually being set out of their homes. And I joined a group and I remember saying that we may have come over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And that led the charge. Inez was instrumental in teaching me a lot about housing and housing
So we're
discriminations.
seeing more and more investors, less home ownership.
And
Again,
that's what we saw then. We saw that then, and people kind of ignored it. People kind of thought that, oh, that's just the east side of Cleveland issue. But as it began to, because I remember going to these outer ring suburbs, most east and west side, and it was kind of downplayed. But we can't downplay it anymore. The fact is that there is a return of this through the investors. And if we continue to allow the investors to come into our neighborhoods, then we're removing the neighbor. And that is the most significant part of a neighborhood, and we can't afford to do it. So we will continue this fight to make sure that people realize the danger that we are in and that they prepare themselves to fight it.
So,
So thank you.
So,
Thank you, Councilwoman.
so council represents the people of our community, our county,
Yes.
we hope. And so this committee, along with the council president's support of the initiatives that we've started here, we want to make sure that the county tries to find a way with its, we have a bully pulpit.
Yes.
And we want to make sure that's the reason why this work is important.
Yeah.
So that we convince at least the lenders who have statutory responsibilities because of their relationships with the federal government to do community reinvestment activities of a really substantive nature, so that we see these numbers that are the flip of what we want to see. That there's a negative on the east side of Cleveland and even in the western inner suburbs. And there's negative impact going on in home ownership, which is the best way to stabilize a neighborhood.
Yes.
If there are 10 houses on a street and 9 of them are owned and lived in, there's the thing called bathroom and kitchen envy that people get by going to each other's homes and saying,
Yes.
honey, did you see their half bath downstairs? And she said that they did that over the last 6 weekends themselves by going to Home Depot and Lowe's. Now, they didn't have to pull a permit. They did the work themselves, but their house is now of more value to them. And if they do a more substantive investment where they have to pull a permit, then it shows up in the city's records. Then when the appraisal arm comes through for Cuyahoga County, we get a little increased value.
Yes.
We are here for the long term as county government and looking at the importance long term of keeping our neighborhoods stable and having our banking partners help us invest in ways. We will hopefully continue to come up with the right kinds of programs through our housing and economic development departments, and the perspective that an investment in communities makes housing values go up and convinces neighbors to continue to invest. But we also want to find out ways to encourage our lenders to do better. And so this is not a committee for belly aching. It is a committee for finding ways to encourage the larger lenders and maybe some of the smaller ones, as well as some of the credit unions and mortgage lenders to do more to help our residents invest more in saving our houses and in making sure that our neighborhoods are stable.
And Madam President, that's one of the reasons why
Vice President,
that I find it so important to sit on this subcommittee is because I know that we can, as a group, make a difference and make a change. And so I value and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, but I also appreciate the time that we spend just going over the information, getting the input from everyone at this table, and then making sure that we implement some of those changes and make sure that they happen. So thank you very much.
Okay, Frank, let's
One
wind
last-
this up because we have a couple other
So,
things I want to do this
Just the final
afternoon.
observations and suggestions are that, that it seems to me there is still a significant unmet mortgage credit need in Cuyahoga County. Historically, redlining or lack of access to mortgage loans was the motivation for the Community Reinvestment Act, which provides for these ratings that the regulators give to banks. But the rating system, it has so many broad categories that banks are able to get outstanding ratings when even there's still this unmet mortgage credit need. But interesting, though, when local governments, whether that be the city of Cleveland or Cuyahoga County, enter into their partnership with the bank, they're not obligated to be bound by those same broad standards. So this gets to the last 2 bullets, that where access to credit is still an issue, government and bank partnerships should, this is my recommendation, should include clear benchmarks for expected lending performance And the last one is where where they do include broader categories beyond lending, they should also include specific metrics and benchmarks. And I think we've talked about that, and there may be some opportunity to, I believe that the county treasurer, when he's met with you, and has said that he's open to hearing suggestions from this subcommittee about what could be in the next banking services agreement.
So that brings us to conclusion.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your homework. As you know, you have more homework to do.
I do, yes.
And I want to let you remove yourself from the table.
Sure.
And then I see the deputy, one of the deputy county executives in the room, or deputy to the chief of staff. Which way does that title go? Deputy chief, and the treasurer. So who's going to come to the table and talk briefly? If the treasurer would approach, please. Thank you for coming in today. If you would please identify yourself for the record and your position with the organization.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Brad Cromus, County Treasurer.
Thank you for coming in today. We'd like to have you briefly talk to us about the banking services RFP. We know there are things that you cannot say to us because you're in the evaluation process. You've accepted and are evaluating, but you have not made a final decision yet. But we would like to know what you can tell us given the legal parameters around the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. It's my privilege to join you this afternoon to give you an update on how our banking services RFP process is progressing at this point. Just by way of introduction, I had the privilege of becoming county treasurer in Cuyahoga County on November 1st of this year, so this process was well underway when I took office. So I've been brought up to speed by other members of the administration, members of my staff on where we stand with this, and I've had the privilege of sitting in on the portions that have proceeded since November 1st. So with that said, where we stand at this juncture, we have done interviews with the 4 finalist banks, which were Key Bank, Huntington Bank, U.S. Bank, and PNC. We had the opportunity to ask questions, many of which revolved around CRA and their performance of CRA, their responsiveness to the CRA provisions in the RFP itself. And it's my understanding this is the first CRA that the county, or first RFP that the county has done that has included CRA provisions, which is a big win. Having come from another county in the state, that's not something that I think is super common in a lot of these. So I think it speaks to the seriousness that the members of the administration, the council has to addressing this in this community. So I just wanted to call that out as being important early in the process. So we've finished review of those. Yes, ma'am.
I could have you step back. There were 6 or 7 categories of evaluation.
That's correct. Business services, CRA was one of those categories.
So could you go over the categories that?
I don't have the RFP in front of me right now, so I can't get into that, unfortunately.
Okay, it would be good for all the members of the committee and those who are watching us virtually to know what a lender is evaluated against, not what each of these folks did, but to see how in-depth we were, or rather your staff and the administration were in evaluating them. This was not just somebody coming in, shaking our hand, and the smoother they were, the better their evaluation.
Yeah, simple undertaking. That's for sure. And I can absolutely get you a copy of the RFP in those broad categories after the meeting today. But to even get to the finalist stage, it was a significant review process, a couple hundred pages each, generally speaking, of responsiveness. And then again, as I'd mentioned before, we asked questions to follow up with initial responses there. So all of that said, we have contacted all 4 of those finalist banks to inform them that they have received some portion of the county's business for the next contract service period. The final determination as to which portions of the county business each of those institutions will receive have not been made. It's our position that those will be negotiated as we move forward, and part of our contract negotiation process will include conversations around CRA, what commitments we can get the institutions to make, as well as performance of business services, which, as you know, is an important piece that my office cares significantly about, given the billions of dollars that we have to manage the collection and distribution of on an annual basis. So, having said that, I just wanted to also inform you all kind of some of the conversations that have gone on around the RFP and around our evaluation and things we as a county can do to be more proactive in the CRA space. I've had the opportunity to sit down with Sarah Parks Jackson, who's here from the housing office, and we've had conversations around HELP and Heritage Home, which, as you all know, are the county's linked deposit lending programs for stabilizing housing, fixing up houses, and preserving home value. We had some really productive conversations around ways we might be able to expand those programs, just leveraging the county's investment portfolio to put a little more heft behind them, potentially to expand them to include some Main Street reinvestment and small business in our communities. That's something I have a little bit of experience with, having done that in Portage County. So I'm excited to have more conversation on that and to unpack that more. I also have a conversation scheduled with Jennifer Kuzma from First Suburbs tomorrow, in which we'll be having a conversation about how we can leverage regionality to more effectively get our banking partners to commit to doing more community reinvestment across the region. Cuyahoga County is home to 59 communities, as you know, so there are a lot of kind of disparate areas of agency and control that if we were to work collectively, we think we might be able to get further in unpacking that. So that'll be part of the top line conversation I have with Jennifer
Treasurer,
tomorrow. Yes, ma'am.
In your preliminary conversations with these 4 very qualified lenders, has there been an understanding of the fact that they should leverage the whole rather than pick us apart? That is one county that contains both what a couple of our wealthiest communities are, Gates Mill and Bracknell, but it's also the same county that contains East Cleveland. And so we should average rather than separate them and do as little business in one as possible and as much business as possible in the other. We need them to kind of homogenize what they're doing. We don't want them to go broke. We don't want them to not have a business model that works for them. But we do need for them, as my mayor from Maple indicated, there are moments when people just have bad luck. Their company goes out of business. They were a hard worker, but the company went out of business, so they're looking for a job. And each of their monthly mortgage payments were late for the last 4 to 6 months. But they tried to make them. And then but then they caught up when they finally found another job. But that's held against them when they go in for a rehab loan. Those are the kinds of things with the downsizing and making things electronic. The heart of lending gets lost in the processing. And that sometimes is one of the reasons why some of our neighborhoods begin to teeter, and we don't want them to fall. So have you had conversations where they talked about some decisions they made that might help bring the heart back to banking?
I think broadly there's an understanding, and I appreciate the question, Madam Chairwoman, that this is one community and there's an interest in having our banking partners reflect that in the work that they're doing in the community. So each of the institutions presented in some depth on the work that they are doing to reinvest in communities, again, broadly. We did ask for some more granular detail in terms of community by community within Cuyahoga County. That information is something that we're still unpacking and trying to get a little bit more information on. But, you know, each of them did spend some considerable time and energy in their responses preparing and discussing how it is that they're working on reinvesting in the community. So they're all doing something, and it is substantial in most cases. I think that there is also, though, an understanding that it can be more and should be more. And so it's the impetus then is on us as a county to leverage our partnerships with other regional partners to ask for more. And that's one of the things I think that we very much are looking forward to getting from this subcommittee are some metrics that we can take to these banking partners that are specific deliverables with respect to community lending and those sorts of benchmarks that we can ask them to deliver for us.
So did you have a question or a time during your dialogue with these lenders where the idea about creativity and what they could potentially do that we hadn't thought of that might be financially good for them, but even better for some of our constituents.
We've started some of those conversations, and I think that circles back to the piece about link deposit and what the county can do to partner. I know that many lending institutions look at link deposit programs as a part of their part of their CRA portfolios. So there is opportunity there to leverage that, and whether that's a dollar for dollar match or some kind of a grant making program or something. But I think using those vehicles, that's a good place to start those conversations. And I know that that most of them are familiar with it. I would point out that the HELP program and Heritage Home both kind of exist on the back of longstanding banking agreements that haven't been renewed at any time in the recent past. And I believe the only one that we currently have is with Key. And so there is an opportunity for us to reach out and to bring more lenders on. There are a lot of reasons for that, not least of which, as you'd pointed out before, is that the interest rates were so low for so long that the reduction that comes with a link deposit program didn't make a whole lot of sense for most lenders. Now that we've got more space there and there's more margin for operation, I think that it'd be worth revisiting and something I think we're going to unpack very, very seriously.
Thank you. What's next?
In terms of the process, you mean? Oh, so at this juncture, our banking agreements, I believe, all run through March of next year. So we're in a process where we need to
Hey,
move.
we're ahead of schedule.
We need to,
for a
well,
change.
we're not though, it's the thing. So we need to move relatively quickly to get those negotiation processes underway. Having notified all 4 of the lenders that they are finalists and that they will be receiving a portion of our portfolio, that's the space we're in now. So our staff will be reaching out and trying to determine what we need to do to negotiate contracts. So this is the moment where the feedback from this subcommittee is probably at its highest value. And if we can receive benchmarks sooner than later that we can go to them to begin those negotiations with,
You will find
that'll
that
help.
this committee is eager to provide you with its opinion.
Great, I have no doubt, and I'm looking forward to having it, absolutely.
Questions? Mayor? Ms. Anderson? Mr. Benjamin?
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment. I'm enthusiastic and optimistic about the relationships and the process. I believe that you really delve into to pick the best 4 banks. I'm optimistic that they will enhance their services in all communities. Thank you for making the comment about the wealthiest, and then there's East Cleveland. So I think it's a new beginning, and what we give you and what you've heard today will help you as you conclude these agreements.
Yeah, very much so.
Thank you.
I do want to thank your team, especially the Deputy Chief of Staff, for sticking with us and providing us with support, because not everybody sees activists as good spirits, and so thank you to your team.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, she was just showing me some of the RFP information, so I think
Okay.
I
Can
think
you tell
probably
me the
I wanna-
categories now?
we can do that broadly. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
If you want to just, I can. Yeah, since we're in it, yeah, provider background was a part of that. So we were looking at ratings from the major rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. We were talking about the organizational chart, who it is that services the account, what folks experience working with the county and other governments of similar size were and are, how banking institutions intend to keep products current and competitive. We were looking for references that were specific within the state of Ohio, what the reporting standards look like, and kind of the back of house piece that my staff works with banks on a daily basis. We specifically called out lending in Cuyahoga County for small business, home mortgages, and home repair, and specifically asking what the institutions do to foster lending products to low-income and high-minority areas in the community. We were looking at maps of physical branches in Cuyahoga County, and also 5 years worth of CRA ratings and HMDA data. So, again, pretty broad. There's more that we unpacked in that, but those are the broad strokes. Yeah, thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to comment that your regional work sounds impressive to me, because the more we can build up in a pot, the better our leverage is, so I like that.
Yeah, and we're fortunate to have Christopher Alvarado leading the regional collaboration effort at the county. I know he recently came on board and has had some preliminary conversations with the mayors of the first suburbs group, and is going to be helping us work through those conversations as well. So I think there's a lot of promise there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, so just, I guess by way of closing, we, again, appreciate the time and energy and effort that has gone into helping us kind of think through what we need to be asking institutions in terms of our community lending, and to the extent that you can continue providing that feedback as we move forward, and I know that you will, we appreciate that, and that really helps us out a lot, so thank you very much.
Thank you. So now what we're going to do is bring Frank back, because we're going to answer the question that is still outstanding. That is, what kind of comments and metrics we can make to the treasurer's office and the deputy chief of staff's team to make sure that we try and get the best we can out of the banking services we are about to venture into, with metrics that give us measurement, so we're not just complaining. We're giving people a way to keep us satisfied so that we can say we were happy with their work, as opposed to unhappy or negative in our comments. Frank, we narrowed it down to 4 or 5, or was it just 3 categories of?
It might be 3. I don't have that in front of me, but that was, I think that wasn't so much aimed at what would the next specific contract be. It was a little more aimed at what's the broader agenda for
Right,
this.
but we could come up with
Oh, yeah.
with a set of metrics.
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
go with those 3 broad categories.
And I have a suggestion. Cynthia and I were just talking about this, and I was going to tell her my suggestion, but I will share it with the whole group. One thing is, we have a working group that has met.
Right.
That working group could be convened at least to take the first shot at this, and certainly with Cynthia as well. It occurred to me another thing that I was thinking about it as an exercise. What if I took the 13 community commitments that were in the original agreement with KeyBank, which I think we've felt were a little vague.
Actually, I don't want to go back to the 13.
Well,
I want to go to the ones we drilled down and summarized.
Well, let me say where I was headed with this. You might, just as an exercise, and then have to the right, what would that look like if they actually had specific, concrete, measurable benchmarks?
Well, actually, we did that already, Frank. We came up with benchmarks we wanted, and I really want to stay away from talking
Okay.
about key and those original
I hear you.
measurements. I'm going to use executive privilege here.
Yes,
And we're done with that.
Okay.
So
No,
let
then,
us go to the new conversation we've had. We've got a new dialogue
Okay.
going on, a new administration, a new executive. He's got a different leadership team. We have to focus on the future as opposed to what we said in the past. And I think the comments that this body made previously about the categories about home ownership, about small business lending, about not only mortgages, but home repair. The reality is putting metrics with those key areas and where we see the lending being done, whether it's all exclusively in the wealthier west side suburbs, or we're actually seeing the numbers increase on the east side of Cleveland and in the inner ring suburbs, which are our most devastated sections of this county due to some historic lending practices. That's where I believe the committee and I want you to focus.
It works for me.
Helping us tell the 4 lenders
Right.
that have given the best proposals the way to stay on track with their partnership. And I like using that word. It gets overused a lot. But when you're placing your money in trust with someone, not only are they capable of helping make sure you don't lose any of the principal, but seeing it grow. And one of the ways that our money can grow is if our residents and constituents in the neighborhoods where that money is invested are more stable, and long-term, their value increases. So what we earn in real estate taxes goes up, not because we've done a levy, which is what everyone hates. They don't want to see another levy from the county or an increase on that levy. But they don't have a problem paying higher taxes when their value increases, because they hope
Right.
with the increase of that value, that whenever they have to sell and use it to help with their retirement or to help their kids, that long-term their value is better. And so I'm hoping that Cuyahoga County becomes a good guardian of the value of our residents' homes.
I think I hear where we're headed.
Thank you, sir.
And I assume I'll convene the working group.
So if
and-
you can convene the
Yes.
working group at least virtually as soon as
Yeah.
possible,
Yes,
I would greatly appreciate that.
Okay.
Any comments from my committee members? Okay. I think we've completed our meeting. Oh, it's been over my favorite time, but this is the last meeting of the year,
yeah.
and it is incredibly important because of what the administration is about to complete and present to council for support. So could we have a meeting in the next 2 weeks? So by the first week of the year, by the end of the first week in the year, we might
No
be
later
able to
than that.
make some recommendations
Right.
to the administration?
Oh, and now you're talking about this group reconvening?
Yes,
I thought
yes.
you meant the working group. Okay.
No, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the working group,
Yeah.
because we won't meet until the third week of the new year, I think. That's the schedule, the proposed schedule.
Do we have a proposed set of dates for next year?
I'm not sure, but we
Okay.
will tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Miscellaneous business, I think that takes care of it for everything else.
Excuse me,
Is-
Madam Chair, if I
yes.
could just state for the record that Mr. Gary Benjamin is in attendance.
Okay. I want to thank you all for your attendance. It's the end of the year. Tomorrow we'll have our last council meeting of the year. I am delighted that we had another year of service with this committee. As Mrs. Anderson indicated, it's incredibly important that we keep our eye on this prize. The real estate taxes in this county are one of the major sources of revenue that not only take care of the county, but take care of our school systems, most importantly. There's a small amount that goes to our municipalities, the libraries. It is incredibly important that our job is to help county staff make sure they've done the best they can on the measurement. Will we be perfect? Will we agree perfectly on everything? Absolutely not. But our best efforts are so important because nobody else is about this business but us. So thank you all for your continued support of making Cuyahoga County one of those places that looks not just today, but to the long-term stability of its residents and its financial position in this world. If there's no further business for us, Happy New Year, whatever your faith or beliefs, and may we begin the new year even stronger than this year was for all of us. This meeting is adjourned.